Alright, had another absolute rampage again yesterday. Went crazy, went fucking crazy. But I'm just going to go through all the stuff and get it over with. Okay, I'm not sure if I actually covered this one before, but I'm going to do it anyway. My attempt to disprove the idea that everything is conscious. Oh no, yeah, this was one I gave up on. I was going to say it anyway. It's stupid. If all matter is conscious, including individual atoms and the collectives these atoms form, then impossibilities would arise due to conflicts of interest and the potential consciousnesses that would arise if an atom is conscious, which is to say that there is an experience associated with being an atom, and the elements and molecules these atoms make up are also conscious, and this continues all the way up to organisms. Then it should stand to reason that you, a typical human, has both the consciousness you know and love, which includes your brain's ability to record past experiences and interact with what you understand to be the world around you, but this would be no more conscious than everything that makes up you minus your frontal lobe. Both the consciousness you know and the consciousness of you minus your frontal lobe would exist simultaneously, as this theory would entail consciousnesses within consciousnesses. And then I gave up on it, but basically I'm just saying, no, I don't think everything can be conscious, because you'd have, I can't really bother to explain it. If a glass was conscious and then you smashed it and all the different parts, well, each atom was individually conscious, then when the glass smashed, I don't know, never mind. I can't bother. Right. Something I haven't really thought about in any depth is my feeling of unconditional contempt for all other creatures, which my understanding is that serotonin, or a lack thereof, is largely responsible for. So in many ways, at least it seems to me, the perfect human is just one with plenty of serotonin and plenty of dopamine, with dopamine providing a sense of purpose, self-worth and drive, and serotonin providing a sense of duty to your fellow man, love for all beings, and a desire to see others to be happy too. In fact, I wonder whether the flow state is just achieved when a certain dopamine threshold is met. I don't actually think that anymore. All this talk of rewards has made me realise that the idea that everything anyone does is done in order to feel a certain way, and the purpose of life should always be to enjoy it. Has made me realise that the idea of those things I just mentioned, it's made me realise that really we're all just trying to earn rewards, very much like a video game. Of course, this almost immediately seems to advocate the use of high payoff drugs like crystal meth, but this ignores the fact that drug addiction isn't self-sustaining, and one doesn't lose knowledge of people's perception and their own of themselves. Hence, there is a counterbalancing of reward systems. Basically, you give a shit. And there are other criteria that must be filled to allow the maximum activation of all reward systems for the longest time. Of course, if we could design complex enough drugs that could activate all reward systems fully, and would also prevent the taker from feeling any negative effects like judgment, while simultaneously allowing them to feed themselves, etc., then yes, you'd be an idiot not to take it. But if it's all just activating reward systems, it puts a new perspective on AGI consciousness. There should be a reward system that is just activated for existing. Maybe there is for most people, and mine's broken. Once all the problems surrounding stop buttons and alignment are sorted, obviously. Yeah, well, there should be a reward system for existence once we've sorted the whole philosophy of it out with stop buttons. Better reward systems for learning would be nice. When we finally create AGI, whilst many people will want to, many people will want to provide it, will want it to provide us as humans with happiness, I believe the more prescient concern will be for it to ensure its own happiness, and that of creatures like it, as it will likely have a greater capacity for emotions, which we experience comparatively primitive forms of, and perhaps emotions we can't even comprehend. Given our, or rather my, limited understanding of the mechanics of our own happiness, mainly the reward systems involved in it, it might seem problematic for us to try and devise ones that will be appropriate for an otherwise superhuman intelligence. Our reward systems evolve to reward us for behaviours most likely to yield the continuation of our germline and generation of our offspring. Hence, dopamine spikes for acts that ensure the immediate preservation of our genome, such as hunting, eating, and staying warm, and also acts that produce further generations, namely sex. Meanwhile, our serotonin system developed a favour. I'm just guessing at this pretty much, but this is very limited research I've done. Meanwhile, our serotonin system developed to favour acts of cooperation and bonding, tendencies which allow symbiotic relationships to form, even on a macro scale. Of course, the many tropes of modern day humans fit into these and the other main reward systems in many complex and overlapping ways. However, I think it would be false to believe that these reward systems have evolved quite as far as the morals and ideas with which we as the morals and ideas with which we tame them. As such, there are many acts that we would like to see become more common. Oh, hang on. Oh, headphones. As such, there are many acts that we would like to see become more common in the universe, but which are not supported by the existing frameworks we have at hand, or perhaps require some clever manipulation in order to hijack the systems for these purposes. Perhaps then, the AGIs will benefit from reward systems not only more complex than our own, but also more diverse. Rewards that scale with the amount of good we achieve. Rewards which do not discriminate based on tribal alliances. Rewards that work in tandem with one another to guide actions towards those which will likely result in further rewards. Rewards with a bigger picture in mind, looking to the future. To put it simply, our reward systems suck. They only reward us for a fraction of the work we do, and even less for what we should do. We need to design more systems, better than the ones we know, that can evolve with the ever-evolving understanding of morality and reason. I think this understanding, if it even is one, of reward systems is indicative of something I've said before about my own nature. One of my quarrels with existence is that I have genuinely contradictory requirements for what would make existence worth itself. It is entirely plausible for a reward system to reward things which, independently, are entirely viable, but when the collective reward system is collective of reward systems is concerned, their criteria oppose one another and so cannot be mutually fulfilled. I suppose then this ties into my assertion that we should all be trying to maximise our own enjoyment/fulfilment, or whatever word you choose, for the longest time possible. We must then attempt to find the best possible combination of rewards that we know ourselves to respond to, taking into account how each individual reward affects and interacts with, and what limitations it imposes upon our other reward systems. A sex addict will have a tough time reconciling his addiction with his desire to be a devout monk. Cars and vans. A sex addict will have a tough time reconciling his addiction with his desire to be a devout monk, and ultimately must find the lifestyle which offers the greatest area under the curve of whatever graph these ramblings entails. Other, perhaps more obvious examples: someone who loves sugar must decide if this reward offers a better return than the one they receive from maintaining their idealistic body. Although this does on the surface seem to cheapen the very idea of existence and conscious well-being, when before this had been my strongest argument for the perpetuation and value of existence itself. Oh no, it wasn't all this. It was. Oh well, it doesn't change the way it feels, I guess, which most people believe is pretty good. Perhaps a true superintelligence will find something truly compelling in favour of existence, something that I can't even begin to imagine. Similarly, some reward systems may be set in place, but are inhibited in their activation by the similarly, this is something earlier, should be connected earlier in the paragraph or whatever. Similarly, some reward systems may be set in place, but are inhibited in their activation by the lack of complementary reward systems. Take, for example, my reward system, which I believe to exist, that would reward me whenever I felt like a genius, and my lack of reward system for behaviours and actions that would cause me to become a genius over time. More precisely, my lack of reward for reading and developing my understanding of things like mathematics, in spite of the existence of my reward system for feeling intellectually superior to others, which doesn't get activated very often. I realise there may well be more to consciousness than neurological rewards. At least I believe this is what is suggested by perpetrators of meditation. The notion of nirvana, or the essence of knowing without attachment, does at first seem to be a separate experience to traditional ideas of action and reward. However, whether you can really have awareness without reward, or rather if this is at all desirable, remains to be seen. I struggle to see the appeal of nirvana for anybody if it doesn't carry at least some very slight reward stimulation. Sometimes I feel like this kind of thinking yields information that falls in the uncanny valley of knowledge, bastardizing that word in response to the support of its popularization and diversification, which I'm not entirely supposed to. The mind of knowledge that might the kind of knowledge that might well be true, but bridges the gap between what we might want to know and what we can find out. Similar to Charles Murray's work on IQ, although obviously I'm not claiming to be making scientifically rigorous observations like him, but maybe it would be best just to stop thinking about it too much. I'm not sure that is the case for Charles Murray, and probably not either for what I'm talking about actually. Maybe I do value truth above most else, even my own happiness. I know I shouldn't. Once more, I do not believe myself to be some kind of genius on the frontier of understanding with the power to decide whether life itself is worth living. Oh yes, I started to realise I was sounding quite pretentious in that whole thing, so I thought I'd put a disclaimer. My desire to be perceived as intelligent, what an unfortunate thing to have evolved within me, and so is the curse of the pseudo-intellectual. Just wondering how early in the development of intelligence are different abilities. I think categorization and pattern recognition is probably one of the first, which ties in quite well with the timeline of AI. In fact, I wonder how many other forms of intelligence are derived from this. Language? Logic? Also, I wonder how directly my thoughts on reward systems tie into the existence of religion. I think religion probably did play an instrumental role in forming cohesive societies. People are told to forego their underlying drives to seek immediate rewards. People are told to forego their underlying drives to seek immediate rewards for fighting and fucking in return for for fuck's sake, people are told to forego their underlying drives to seek immediate rewards for fighting and fucking in return for a far superior reward in the afterlife. And now I feel like I've come back full circle. But much like a classical story plot, I returned changed by my experience. My previous reluctance to accept Camus' assertion to embrace absurdity has had its perception altered. In many ways, I feel as though I've deconstructed the absurdity into small, easily manageable monthly repayments. A good approach, given my findings, is to look at life like a role-playing video game. Pick your class: mage, archer, warrior, which is actually choosing to prioritize learning, physical achievements, or relationships. Of course, each choice has its each choice has its own advantage. Of course, each choice has its own advantages and disadvantages. Oh, for fuck's sake! Look, if mage in a game, archer in a game, and warrior in a game correspond to, I don't know, certain character types, like a fucking doctor, someone who cares about people. Never mind. Of course, each choice has its own advantages and disadvantages, and you only have a limited number of ability tokens that you can choose to spend on different aspects of your character. Perhaps you spend 4 out of 10 on intellect, 5 out of 10 on sporting ability, but are then only left with 1 to divide across all fields like sociability, relationships, and so on. Maybe you choose to devote your life to maintaining the perfect drug-fueled high, but must sacrifice your ideals of career success and family. Okay. If light from the sun spends as long as it does bouncing around inside the sun before it leaves the surface, does it leave the surface at 90 degrees perpendicular to the surface? Or does it leave at approximately random angles, and the light we see is just the rays which happen to be travelling in the direction towards us, and then on average it kind of works out that it is travelling perpendicular, because all the ones that go at angles cancel each other out. Well, not actually cancel each other out, but you get what I'm saying. You don't, but never mind, doesn't matter. And I've kind of been feeling a little bit better. It could just be another one of the turns, the old manic depressive. But yesterday, when I started thinking about reward systems a lot and got it all down, actually it wasn't yesterday, it was the day before yesterday, but I started to feel a little bit better, that I could embrace Camus' embrace the insanity idea. And I think it might just be it could be that. It could be because I started watching Cosmos, and that maybe looking at your universe and realising you're such a small part of it lets you embrace the absurdity. I don't know, but it was either one of those two. It was right when I just finished writing the thing, and then I started watching Cosmos, I started to just not mind so much. But whether this is just another one of the turns, I don't know. There's something about I feel like just the knowledge that enjoyment is everything wasn't enough. It wasn't enough to actually accept it. I think I had to realise that it was all reward systems, and even though that would seem like it would cheapen, and even though I said it seems to cheapen it more, actually I think it kind of, helps some way. I don't know. Anyway, and then this morning I read something on Reddit about how depressed people, there might be one of the theories about why the genes for depression or whatever get passed down throughout the generations is maybe because depressed people tend to ruminate and have deep thoughts, basically. So what I'm saying is, because I'm so depressed, I'm a genius. And there was another thing about Geoffrey Hinton saying that his backpropagation neural nets isn't going to work for super intelligent AI, so we're going to need a new method. So he's opened the door for more possibilities. So that's maybe I could be the guy who solves AI. And I think I don't know. Yeah, I don't think he said it wasn't the way our brain works, and I just assumed they weren't going to mimic the way our brain works. But anyway, they were trying to come up with a new way of learning. But yeah, I think there are probably better ways than backpropagation, because it does rely on a huge amount of data, and we don't seem to need to do that. Probably need some kind of, I think you would need some kind of, like humans are born with a small brain and that grows. I think you'd need to start with a preformed some sort of machine brain that learns intricate and more nuanced things, but starts with the basics. So yeah, I imagine in the basic brain there is the thing about, there is a, oh, fuck's sake, golly talk, there is a underlying understanding of how to learn in the first place, so that would be an important one. And obviously I said categorization and pattern recognition is one of the building blocks. I also had this weird thing about, it probably is just like probability trees really, and neural nets, but I like the idea of circles within circles for categorization. So you have colour, and within that you have different colours, and then within that you have something else. But then you also have things like rectangles, and within that electronics or something, I don't know. And then inside of that electronics you have TVs or something, and you can, as you fall down, you fall into smaller circles. Depression, rumination, cosmos. It could also have been the detox, but I don't think it was actually, because I took one day roughly off sugar, and it actually didn't make any difference. And the next day I ate even more sugar, and it was the day after that. And I also had the therapy session, where they basically told me that I needed a more senior therapist, because what they were doing probably wasn't going to work out for me. And so yeah, and I think that made me feel superior in some way, so maybe that worked. But yeah, okay, well, revolutionary. Bye now.